everyone. What's the emotion code? What happens when emotions get trapped in our body and stay as stuck energy? What's a technique to be able to release that? What's a heart wall? What's the body code? We're going to be learning that and much more tonight. And now, time for What's the Illusion? For those of you new, What's the Illusion is my alternative news blurb for the week, and this time it's from John Antine, this is a Forbes Online article, and the headline was Campbell's Big Fat Green BPA Lie and the Sustainability Activists That Enabled It. Again, my goal here is to educate, you go and figure it out and see if it rings true. Do you know Campbell's and many canned good people have been under fire recently because of the BPA lining that's in soup cans and everything else? Scientists will say that BPA has no harmful effects. I will research that more. I personally disagree with that. And again, I would want to look at who's funding the story. But let's get back to Campbell's. So Campbell's had a ton of public statements and hundreds of congratulatory media stories because they said had found an alternative BPA. And although that's not true. And they have known since March 5th that the media was wrongly praising it for not only something that it hadn't done, but something that it didn't even care to do. David Stanges, who's Campbell's VP of Corporate Social Responsibility and Sustainability, was critical and derisive of the two non-governmental agencies that had targeted Campbell's. He said their press release made it sound like they were taking credit for forcing a change in our behavior when we haven't changed. We believe BPA is safe. For 5 years, we've been looking at substitutes that would be safe. We said 2 years ago when it was safe, a safe substitute was found, we'd use it. Despite what's been said in the press, we're not using it. So the reporter in this article wanted a response from the Breast Cancer Fund, which is one of the organizations that criticized it, and went to anti-BPA journalists, and basically they had nothing to say. And even though they had fought them and really targeted Campbell's, but what we've learned from this is in a real-life crisis, the good word was out about Campbell's and all they were doing. They knew it was false and they didn't even report it, and they did nothing to stop that. So you might want to think about that if you buy Campbell's products. And on the same end, as well, the Breast Cancer Fund that criticized them when told, hey, they aren't doing what you said they were doing, remain mum on the word. So again, my advice is always research something, who's funding it, and even if people say they're advocates for you, they might not be. So you need to be an advocate for yourself. All right, we're going to tell you about tonight's guest. Dr. Bradley Nelson is a holistic chiropractor, physician, and medical intuitive, and is one of the world's foremost experts in the emerging fields of bioenergetic medicine and energy psychology. His best-selling book, The Emotion Code, helps people improve their lives by ridding themselves of their imbalancing emotional baggage. Users have found freedom from emotional problems such as depression and anxiety, as well as physical problems including fatigue, pain, and disease. A key element of the emotion code is removing emotional baggage that has clustered around the heart, interfering with one's ability to find love and success. Dr. Nelson has coined this the heart wall, and it has been called the most important discovery in the history of energy medicine. In 2009, he channeled his life's work into a self-study course, the Body Code System, which teaches students how to balance the body in 6 key areas. It is being used successfully by doctors and lay people to improve the health of thousands of people all over the world. Welcome, Dr. Bradley. Well, I'm excited to have you. We had Doris Crompton from Alabama who introduced me to the emotion code, and I'd never known about it until she told me. But can you explain for everyone what exactly is the emotion code?
Certainly. Well, what happens to us as we live the days of our lives, months and years and so on, what ends up happening is that sometimes we end up feeling intense negative emotions. And the human body itself is really nothing more than an energy field, albeit a very complex energy field. But that's what your body is. I mean, if you look at your hand, it looks pretty solid. But if you could magnify that hand enough, you'd see that that hand is really made of nothing but pure energy. But when we're feeling an intense emotion, like anger or resentment or frustration or whatever it might be, what we're feeling really is a vibrational energy. We're feeling an emotion, but that emotion really is an energy. It's a frequency. Every emotion has a different frequency. And so what happens to us is that sometimes when we're feeling those emotions very powerfully, the energy of that emotion, the vibration of that emotion can be too much somehow for our physical body to process. And the energy of that emotion then can become trapped in the body. And we call that a trapped emotion. Now, a trapped emotion is typically a ball of energy from about the size of a baseball to about the size of a cantaloupe. And wherever these things lodge in the body, they will tend to create two things. They will tend to create physical pain, and they will also tend to create other problems because of the distorting effect that they have on the tissue. In other words, the human body itself is energy. It's an energy field. And when you introduce a trapped emotion into that energy field, what you're doing is you're introducing a distorting force into that field. And so wherever that trapped emotion lands in the body, wherever it lodges, it will tend to distort the normal energy field of the body. And when you distort that normal energy field long enough, you start to have problems because you're really interfering with the flow of chi energy. Mm-hmm. You're interfering with circulation, we believe. You're interfering with the flow of lymph away from those tissues. So eventually, it's very common to start having physical symptoms because of that distorting force in that area. Now, trapped emotions can have all kinds of effects on the body depending on where they lodge. If a trapped emotion lodges in your low back, you'll probably end up with low back pain. If a trapped emotion lodges in your uterus, you might be infertile. If a trapped emotion lodges in the heart, you might end up having some heart difficulties. And so it depends on where they lodge. They can create a lot of different symptoms. But they have another effect, and that is that they are, and they're an energy, they're an emotion if you think about it. So when you have a trapped emotion, you actually are suffering from a continual resonance of that emotional energy. So in other words, let's say, for example, 20 years ago, you're in an argument with somebody and you're really upset and you get a trapped emotion and it's anger and it lodges in your shoulder. Okay. Well, now 20 years later, you may actually have discomfort in that shoulder. You may be headed for surgery with that shoulder, not really knowing, not really understanding that the deep underlying reason for that problem is the argument you had 20 years ago because of the emotional energy that is there. But there's another effect that these trapped emotions have, and that is that literally when we have a trapped emotion, we have an area of the body that is actually feeling that emotional energy all the time. So in a strange sort of a way, for example, let's take that same example. Let's say 20 years ago you developed this trapped emotion, and now you've got a shoulder problem. Well, you're also probably a more angry person than you otherwise would be. Why? Because literally part of your body is resonating at this frequency of anger all the time. And so if a situation arises where you could become angry, you probably will become angry much more readily, much more easily than you otherwise would, because part of your body is buzzing away, resonating at that frequency of that emotion.
Well, when you talk about trapped emotions, and I don't like to use words like negative and positive, but I'm assuming that joy, we wouldn't get joy trapped in our body, would we? Or is that a possibility? Is it mainly like anger, guilt, shame that gets trapped?
Well, most of the trapped emotions we get are negative, but there is something that we call overjoy, which is where you can have an overage of positive emotion, too much excitement, too much good energy. That can actually short circuit and get stuck in the body as well. We don't see that one that often. It's usually the negative ones.
Right. No, I would assume. That's really interesting. So I'm very curious. How did you come up with this? Were you working on a patient and had an aha moment? What made you make this connection and create the emotion code?
Well, there are a number of different methods that have been around for a long, long time of working with emotions and finding emotional energies. And I learned about some of those quite primitive, and I started to use those in my own practice. And of course, there's nothing new under the sun, and I believe that the Chinese discovered all of this centuries ago, and a lot of it I think was lost. But what happened was when I got into practice, I made it a habit of praying and asking for guidance from God for the people that I was working with. And as time went on, more and more information filtered down, and that's really where the emotion code came from. That's why I really don't take any credit for it, because I believe that it was really just sort of brought through me to the world, and I believe that my job in the world is just to teach it and to bring it out to the world and let everybody know how powerful this is and what they can do and how they can help themselves. So it was a gradual process, but once I started understanding how powerful this is, I immediately wanted to start teaching it. And so I started teaching seminars on this about, I don't even know now, quite a few years ago, we'll say, at least 15, 16, 17 years ago. And so for quite a while, I was doing that, going off on weekends, flying all over, teaching seminars, doing my practice during the week. My family was suffering. And eventually I got this message from up above that said, you need to stop what you're doing and you need to actually write a book, and this needs to go out to the whole world because this isn't just for you. So, so that's kind of how it happened.
Wow, that's wonderful. And I appreciate that you don't take credit, that there's a bigger inspiration out there. Can you explain to us, and hopefully I want to remind everyone, if you have a question for Dr. Bradley, you can call at 919-518-9773, Skype in at Computers 2K Voice, or chat. I'm happy to ask the question, but can you maybe take us through, I've done the process, but I'd love to hear you explain it. How does the emotion code help find the trapped anger in the shoulder? How does it find the emotional baggage?
Okay. Well, one of the beautiful things about the emotion code that makes it so different and so much more advanced from so many of the other methods that are out there currently is that we rely 100% on the subconscious mind to tell us what needs to be done. Now, there are a lot of methods on the conscious mind. And the problem with that is that if you're suffering from trapped emotional energy that was inherited, you're not going to find that. If you're suffering from trapped emotional energy that you picked up during the time that you were in the womb, or that happened to you when you were a young infant, you're not going to find that kind of emotion. And so we rely on the subconscious mind. So basically, here's how this works. We spend all of our waking hours in the conscious mind. And that conscious mind is only about 5 to 10% of our intelligence. The other 90 to 95% of our intelligence is, of course, subconscious. And that's the part of us that is really intelligent. And that's the part of us that is really an archiving holographic computer. The part of us that knows if we're sick, why we're sick. The part of us that knows exactly what needs to be done to get us well. The part of us that knows if we have trapped emotions and where they are and what they're doing to us and when they occurred and who was involved, everything. It's all in the subconscious mind, see? So the conscious mind doesn't really know much, but the subconscious mind knows all of it. So what we do is we tap into the subconscious mind, that vast computer database. Now, see, I used to be a computer programmer starting back in about 1980. And which dates me, of course. But anyway, what I learned was that the human body is essentially a computer as well. And the subconscious mind can be tapped into, and we can access that incredible database of knowledge that is in there in that subconscious mind. And we can get that information out, and we can determine what the subconscious mind knows and what we can find out very shortly or very quickly what we need to have done in order for us to get well. So it's truly a revolutionary way of looking at taking care of ourselves, and it's a revolutionary way of taking care of ourselves and of getting well. Because you see, I was always really driven to find out what was really wrong with my patients. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to know. I really wanted to get to the root of things. Well, if this person's got low back pain, why? What's really going on? How can I really know what needs to be done? And so tapping into the subconscious is how we do. There are a number of different methods that we use to tap into the subconscious mind. And one of those we call the sway test. And that's the first one that we teach in the book. And if you'd like, I can share that with your listeners, and they can actually experience this.
Oh, we love it. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Now, first of all, you need to understand that all organisms respond to positive or negative input. So, for example, if you take a potted plant and you put it near a window and you give it water, if you come back a few months later, you'll notice that the plant is growing towards the light coming in from the window. Or, for example, if you take a plant and you put it in front of a speaker, if you play classical, beautiful, soothing music, lullabies and things from that speaker, the plant will actually grow towards the music coming out of the speaker, okay? And the roots will actually grow towards the music coming out of the speaker. Now, on the other hand, if you're playing harsh, acid rock type of music and so on, very loud, abrasive music, the plant will actually grow away from the music coming out of that speaker. And the roots themselves will curve away, bend away from music coming out of that speaker. So it's really interesting. All organisms have this ability, and the human body, of course, is no different. So our body will actually bend or sway forward towards thoughts of truth or positivity or congruency. The body, on the other hand, will sway backward away from thoughts of negativity or falsehood or incongruency. So what I'd like you to do now to try this out, you can do this if you're seated, but it works best if you're standing. Okay, if you want to do it,
camera's on you, so I'm going to stand up and do it.
Yeah, go ahead and stand up. Now, what you do is you just drop your hands down to your sides and close your eyes, okay? Now, you'll notice as you're standing there, I'd like you to just stand as relaxed as you possibly can. Just relax completely. One thing that you'll notice is that it's not possible to stand perfectly still. There's always a little bit of movement, maybe left or right and so on, and that's fine. That's just your postural muscles working to keep you standing upright and keep you from falling over. Now, I'd like you to think about something, and we're going to start with something negative, something that we hear about every day, and that's war. I'd like you to think for a moment about that word. We hear that word all the time. There's war going on all the time, and there has been for countless ages. But I want you to think for a moment about what that word really means. What does it really mean? If you had to describe what goes on in war to someone, what would you tell them? What really goes on in war? Now, the moment that you stop thinking about this in an abstract way, and the moment that you start actually connecting with what war really means, at that same moment, your body will start to sway backward away from the negativity of that thought.
Yeah, I am. That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like the plant growing away from the speakers that are blaring the harsh music. Same thing. Now, I'd like you to, let's shift gears here for a minute. Let's think about something really, really positive. I'd like you to think about unconditional love. Let's imagine that you are surrounded with unconditional love. As you're standing there, totally relaxed, with your arms down by your sides, just imagine that you're being bathed in a field of unconditional love. Imagine that every being on the planet is filled with nothing but unconditional love for you. Imagine that every being in the universe is filled with unconditional love for you. That God is filled with unconditional love for you. And imagine not only that, but imagine that your own heart is capable of giving unconditional love to a point that that unconditional love that you have for every being and for all of creation is so powerful that your heart can't even contain that love, that heart, that love that's inside of you expands out from that heart of yours and goes out past the planets, fills the immensity of space. Imagine what that would be like. Now, the moment that you actually get into a little bit of resonance with this thought, which is a very high, very powerful thought, at that same moment, your body will start to sway forward toward that thought, because that is something I believe that deep inside of us we really want. We really want unconditional love. We want perfection. We want beauty. And that's, I believe, who we came from. And so I know that there are a lot of your listeners right now that are right on their tiptoes as they're contemplating this unconditional love. Imagine. So what this teaches us is that the subconscious mind will respond depending on what we're thinking about. Now, we can also ask questions of the subconscious mind. So, for example, pose this question to yourself. Do I have a trapped emotion? Think about that for a moment. Do I have a trapped emotion? Hold that thought in your mind. And if you do have a trapped emotion, your body will start to sway forward because that's a congruent statement, or the answer, in other words, is yes. Yes, I do. And the subconscious will tend to sway forward for yes and backward for no. Now, there's nothing spooky or weird about this. It's just really the spirit within us, and that's really who we are. If you've ever been to a funeral and you see that person lying there in the casket, you realize there's something different. There's something that's gone from that person. And that's what I believe, that's what really I think what we're tapping into is the spirit that is in us, and that's really who we are, and that's who we take with us when we leave and we die and they have our funeral. We go on, okay? And so that's what we're tapping into. So how did that unconditional love one work for you, Julie?
I was right up against the table. I mean, I'm sitting here, and it was lucky it was there because I was ready to just become prone and go down, and I think that's a great tool. So your first suggestion for someone just starting out, that's a simple tool that they can do. I'm curious, as you've been talking, I found in my own healing journey that it seems I have layer upon layer. What I found is a lot of anger would come up, but really what was under the anger, at least for me, was sadness. And so when you're working with the emotion code, you talked about earlier getting to the root. So when you figure out what the trapped emotion, does that just completely eliminate it and there are no more layers? It's gotten down for that particular emotion.
Well, you know, the old analogy of the body being like an onion is perhaps overused, but very true. That as we start releasing these emotions, we sometimes do have layers of things. Now, of course, if we're working on a child, oftentimes those layers are pretty shallow. And 1 or 2 sessions, and you might be able to get through all of those to where they don't have any other trapped emotions at all. And that's how we really should be raising all of our children, okay? Having 7 children of my own, I know that the emotion code can make an enormous difference in how it works to raise your kids. But yes, absolutely, you can have layers, and depending on all the experiences that you've been through, sometimes it takes a while to get through those layers. But it's a process like anything else. And the beautiful thing about the emotion code is that whenever we release a trapped emotion, they're gone permanently. We've never ever seen one actually come back because that energy is transformed and changed and gone. So if that weren't the case, I don't think I'd bother doing it.
And have you found that certain emotions seem to get stuck in areas of the body, or does it really vary from person to person?
Well, you know, that's a great question. Typically, when you trap an emotion, it will often lodge in an area where there is some kind of a weakness, where maybe you've had an injury or maybe you've had an infection or some kind of a little trauma. That's pretty common. But there's also the metaphysical side of it too. So if, for example, you feel like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders and you develop a trapped emotion of feeling unsupported about that, well, that will likely lodge in your neck or in your shoulders, okay? If you're feeling like you are, well, let's say, for example, that you're feeling like no one is giving you the backup that you need, but you have had some sort of, maybe it's about your relationship, okay? Maybe you're in a relationship and maybe you're upset about something. That trapped emotion may very well lodge in the breasts, okay? Or maybe in the sex organs if it's about a relationship. It all depends. If it's about moving forward and you are just feeling like you can't move ahead and you develop some kind of a trapped emotion about that, well, it may lodge in one of your feet. So it just depends. There's the metaphysical side of it, and then there's also the likelihood that a trapped emotion will get stuck where you've had some kind of problem.
And so I'd like to get a little deeper on that. How can, if we have trapped emotions, can that prevent us from being successful in life or finding that relationship that we're working for? How does that translate? Because I think sometimes people don't make the connection that, well, hey, it's just energy in the body. What do you mean it's reflecting my outside life?
Yeah, well, the problem is, you see, the body is just energy. And trapped emotions are just energy too, but they're kind of a polluting form of energy. The energy field of the body should be clear and pristine, and we should be able to be perfect instruments for the Creator to do what we're here to do in this world. But the problem is, when we develop these trapped emotions, they disrupt our lives. They can influence us to make wrong decisions. They can push us into paths that we might rather not take. They will tend to make us feel emotions that we wouldn't necessarily feel. But really, the most powerful thing that we have found with the emotion code that affects us so deeply in our relationships and in our ability to find success and to find abundance and find love is the heart wall. So
can you tell us a little bit? We talked about it briefly in your bio, but that's a pretty significant finding, and I'd say probably most of us, maybe not the Dalai Lama, but I'd say the majority of us probably have a heart wall.
Yes, that's absolutely right. What we find is that 93% of people have a heart wall. Well, what is a heart wall? Well, this is really the most fascinating part of the emotion code, and this discovery of the heart wall has been called the greatest discovery in the history of energy medicine, and I'd love to take credit for it, but it was shown to me, and I'm just trying to get the word out about this. But first of all, understand something about the heart. The ancient peoples understood that the heart was the seat of the soul and the source of our creativity and the seat of our love. And I believe that they were exactly right. Now, for listen for a long time, that those old ideas about the heart have been poo-pooed, and we've just thought, well, they just didn't have the kind of instrumentation that we have now. So those were all just old ideas, and they were quaint, and it was all just poetic license. But no, what we're finding now is that those ancient peoples were actually right about the heart. Because what we are finding now is that the heart, first of all, has a magnetic field that extends out around the body up to 12 feet in diameter. And when you're feeling love or affection for another person, if that person is hooked up to what's called a magnetoencephalogram that's measuring their magnetic brain waves, your heartbeat will appear in the brain waves of that other person. Think about
amazing.
That. Isn't
That's
that astounding?
incredible. Wow.
So you see, there's this communication going on between all of us all the time from heart to heart that we have not really been aware of. But nevertheless, we've all experienced it. Typically, we experience that kind of thing when we're sitting in some kind of a meeting, we're at church or some kind of meeting, and we're kind of staring absentmindedly at the back of someone's head a number of rows up. And if you fixate on that person and you keep staring at the back of their head, it's inevitable what's going to happen. It might take a minute, but they're suddenly going to spin around and look right at you. And they're going to lock eyes with you. Their subconscious mind knows that you're looking at the back of their head. There's a communication going on all the time. Well, anyway, the heart is so fascinating because when we started doing heart transplants back in the 1960s, people started coming back and reporting strange things, such as that they had inherited memories somehow from the new heart that they had. And when they would go to places that they had never been, they had been there. They had memories of that place. They were inheriting memories with their heart. Okay, somehow that heart was bringing memories along with it from the donor. And sometimes people's cravings would change. One of our friends, for example, had a heart transplant and found that after he got out of the hospital, his car would kind of automatically pull into Starbucks. And he'd find himself at the counter ordering a hazelnut latte, not really knowing why, and found out later that that was the favorite drink of the woman whose heart he had received. So there are a lot of other amazing stories. There was a story about a man in Milwaukee, an attorney, who got a heart transplant from a 14-year-old boy who had died. And what came along with that heart was this insatiable craving for Snickers bars. Okay. Didn't like them before. Very, very common. There are thousands of stories like this. There was a story recently, actually it was 2 or 3 years ago, I think now, in the U.S., where a man, older man, I think he was 58 years old or so, got a heart transplant from a younger man who was in his 30s who had actually killed himself, shot himself. And he felt bad for the widow of this man. So when he got out of the hospital, he started writing letters to this man's widow. And for 2 years, they carried on this correspondence by mail. And finally, after 2 years' time, he actually met her. And he said, the moment I saw her, I could not take my eyes off of her. It was like I had known her all my life. And then they actually ended up getting married, even though there's an age gap. Well, no one would ever have known about this, except that about 8 years later, he ended up killing himself, shot himself in the head, just like the donor. So there's a lot of stories like this. Another one, just really quickly, that's very amazing is a young girl who got a heart transplant from another young girl who had been murdered. And she started having these recurring nightmares after she got out of the hospital that she was being killed. And her nightmares were so vivid and so consistent that she was able to describe to the police the appearance and the description of this man who was trying to kill her in her dream and the murder weapon. And her descriptions helped lead to the arrest and the conviction of the killer. Think about that.
That's beyond words.
It's really amazing. Well, anyway, what happened to me was something very profound, and it's a little bit hard to describe, but I will try. Back in 1998, I was with my wife at a convention that I was supposed to be speaking at on magnetic healing, and on the morning of this convention, she said, I've had a dream. And in her dream, there were 3 symbols. And when she woke up, she knew that these 3 symbols had to do with issues related to her health and well-being. So she asked me if I would help her to figure out what these issues were. And I said I would. And so we started doing some testing and figuring out. And we figured out the first 2 symbols and took care of those. They were some emotions that we'd missed before. When I turned my attention to the 3rd symbol from her dream, I suddenly had what I can only describe as a waking vision, where I saw before me this beautiful hardwood floor. And I mean, this was the most beautiful hardwood floor I've ever seen. And I saw this. I did not imagine this. This actually was suddenly there in front of me. And this floor looked like it had 100 coats of polish. It was absolutely gorgeous. But at the same time that I'm seeing this floor, I have this understanding that's very clear in my mind that my wife's heart is underneath this floor that I'm seeing. Now, I had absolutely no clue, no idea at all what this meant. And I told my wife what I was seeing and understanding, and we prayed and asked for some help from up above, and we started doing some testing and trying to figure this out. Well, here's what we found out. She was born into a very dysfunctional family. Her father was a rageaholic, and everyone was always walking on eggshells. No one knew when he was going to blow up or at who or for what. And so there was a lot of heartache in that family. Now, when we feel that emotion, when we feel that feeling, when we're deeply grieved or hurt, it can feel like a physical sensation. And that's where those words like heartache and heartbreak actually come from that physical feeling. Sometimes you feel like you're choking. You feel like there's an elephant sitting on your chest like you can't breathe. That had happened to her enough that by age 2, her subconscious mind started to build a wall around her heart to protect her heart from being totally broken in that dysfunctional family. Now, the result of having that heart wall was that all of her life, it had been difficult for her to make close friends. Mm-hmm. All of her life, with every group that she was ever with, even people that she'd known for many years, even with her own family, she felt like she was an outsider to a degree, like she didn't quite belong, like she was kind of disposable and like she wasn't really part of the group. Until that last emotion was released. What we found was that the heart wall is actually made of layers of emotional energy, you see, trapped emotions. And so we started releasing those emotions from her. And when that last emotion was finally released, she had a feeling suddenly that she was on the inside looking out, like suddenly she belonged for the first time. And she's made tremendous, amazing progress since then. And we have seen so many amazing stories happen because, you see, what we find is that 93% of people seem to have this phenomenon, this heart wall. If you've been hurt in your life to a point where you felt that feeling of heartache or heartbreak, I think if you feel that more than once, maybe once is enough, but I think if you feel it, once or twice, that's all it takes. Your subconscious mind does not like that feeling of deep grief. It's really an assault on the core of who you are. Mm-hmm. So if that happens to you more than a couple of times, the conscious mind will start putting up a wall. And that wall might be just exactly what you need at that time in your life. But it's kind of like living in a bunker. I mean, a bunker might be really appropriate if the bombs are falling, but when the bombs stop falling, to keep living in the bunker is to really miss out on a lot of life. And that's what's happening to so many of us, is that we have that wall, and then the problem is it's harder for us to connect, it's harder for us to fall in love, it's harder for us to stay in love, it's harder for us to find abundance and to truly create what we're here to create. See, I believe that we're here on this earth and we've got this body, and within us we have this divine center, and we have a mission to perform, every one of us in this world. And the problem is, if you look around the world today, the world is really pretty messed up, right? And of course, we've got 93% of people that have a wall around their heart. So most of us are functioning from this brain up here. And if you think about something that Steve Jobs said, for example, people wonder how he was able to create all the amazing things that he did. And he'll go down in history as one of the inventors in the world and so on. And it's changed the whole world. But what he said when he spoke at Stanford in 2004 or 5, he said, you've got to follow your heart. Somehow, your heart already knows where you need to go and what your creation is going to be. You don't know necessarily, but your heart does. That's why you follow your heart. But the problem is, what if you have a heart wall? Well, then you're hampered. Then you're handicapped, you see. And that's why so few people are actually able to follow their heart and really manifest what they're capable of manifesting in this world.
See, this show is my mission, but it took me, I won't tell you how old I am, but it took me, I didn't figure this out until last year, but for me, I had trauma as a child. Now that completely shaped how I am, and I'm at a point where I was able to finally forgive. That took until, unfortunately, very recently to be able to give the people that had harmed me the most, but it made me the woman that I am, and it allowed me to be compassionate. And I so agree with everything you're saying, because I call us the walking wounded. The whole reason I do this show is to bring on people like you can say, oh, wow, that sounds like something that can work for me, because if we're all living our mission and potential, what a different world we'd live in. Yes.
Well, I think that we're headed for that world eventually, that's how the world is going to be, and won't that be amazing? You're absolutely right.
And Dr. Brad, we have a quick question for you from chat, from Violet Spiral. So she says, so you have to release the emotions of what was imprinted on the heart at the time the layers of the wall were created.
Well, basically what happens is the process that we have developed to release the emotions from the heart wall is actually very, very simple. Most people can find a trapped emotion within about a minute, and the heart wall is similar. Let me give you an example. Okay, there was a woman who brought her son to see me. He was 9 years old, and he'd been diagnosed at 9 years old as being clinically depressed.
Wow!
And he was told by I believe by the psychologist that there was nothing that they could do to help him. Or maybe the psychiatrist told him this, and because he wouldn't admit that he was depressed. Well, he's only 9 years old. And so his mom was having a real tough time with this little boy. She'd come into his room at night and he'd be on the floor, and she'd say, what are you doing on the floor? And he'd say, I don't deserve to be in a bed. And depression manifests a little differently when you're 9 years old than it does when you're an adult. But one day she went into his school and paid an unannounced visit to find his teacher berating him and telling him how pathetic he was. I think because she was so frustrated, because she knew that he was smart, but he just would not hand in his homework, or he wouldn't do his homework, and he was just checked out. Well, so she tried doing homeschool, and that didn't work, and she was just at a loss. And finally, she brought him in to see me, and we found he had a heart wall. Now, this little boy had a heart wall that was made of the emotional energies that had been trapped in his body over the previous 4 years. And what had happened was, over the previous 4 years, there had been a number of deaths that had happened in their extended family. And there was a car wreck where a couple of his cousins were killed, and that was painful to him, and that created another layer. And then there was a hayride accident where one of his cousins fell off the hayride and was run over by a tractor, in a terrible accident. And that created another layer of the heart wall. And then we got down to the very last emotion, or the first emotion in this case, that had created that wall. What had happened was, 4 years before, he was with his family at a family reunion at a lake in California. And his sister was there, 12 years old, and he was with his sister, and they were on a dock, and there was no adult supervision around, and she was trying to teach their little cousin, 5 years old, to swim. And something went horribly wrong, and this little boy drowned. Oh. And so this little depressed boy was there when his cousin was finally found and dragged out of the lake, and he was blue and cold, and he was dead. And it was a terrible tragedy for this family. What I found was the emotion actually was guilt. The overwhelming guilt that his sister was feeling at that point for having such a terrible thing happen on her watch as babysitter was so powerful and so overwhelming for his little heart that his heart felt like it was going to break. And that emotional energy became trapped in there, and it created the first layer of this wall. So we cleared that very quickly, very easily. And I worked on it for a total of about a half an hour. And so that was it. His body's testing showed that his heart wall was gone. And so he and his mother went home. For the next couple of days, he was lying around, kind of feeling lethargic. And his mother was thinking, well, it doesn't look like that worked. But on the morning of the third day, after we cleared his heart wall, he got up, he got himself ready for school, which is a first, and he came to his mother, and this is a quote, I'll always remember this. He said, "Mom, I can go back to school now. I'm a happy pappy." That's what he told her. And he did go back to school. And all of his learning disabilities were gone, and he was doing his homework, and he was happy, and his joy was back. And his mother told me she believed if we hadn't done that, if we hadn't found and cleared that heart wall from him, that, she said that she believed it literally saved his life. Now, that little boy now is about 23 years old. Oh. So imagine I took a half an hour out of my life to do that for a little guy. And I mean, think about it. We can all do this kind of thing, and we all have trapped emotions. And you can change someone's life using this method. It doesn't really take a whole lot of time or effort because it's so easy.
Now, I know because we've got some regulars here on chat. So would the emotion code work with, say, someone that did Reiki or another form of energy healing if people are practitioners and have learned, or is it compatible with that?
No, absolutely. The emotion code is compatible with all other forms of energy healing because it's so fast. And we have lots and lots of, we have lots of people all over the world who are using the emotion code, incorporating it into their own practices, whether they are medical doctors or psychologists or hypnotherapists or psychotherapists, you name it, on and on and on, massage therapists, chiropractors, because it's so fast. See, people can usually, once they know how to do this, they can find a trapped emotion and release it, usually in less than about 1 minute. And so there's really nothing else that we've ever seen that comes close to being as fast as this method is, or as final as this method is, as complete as it is, and really as effective as it is. It's really quite remarkable.
Can you talk a little bit, let's switch gears a little bit, about the body code? Because I would love to know more about that.
Well, okay, absolutely, sure. Well, what happened was during all those years that I was in practice, I was very, very driven to find out, like I said before, what people really needed, what their underlying imbalances really were. In other words, if they had cancer, I wanted to know why. Why was the body manifesting this cancer? Or if they had fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome or some autoimmune disease, I wanted to know, I really wanted to get to the underlying roots of that, and I believed that the subconscious mind could take us there. Well, I came at it from a very unique perspective because being a computer programmer for a long time, an old computer programmer, I learned that the subconscious mind answers from it. I put together this whole system that kind of just organically came together for me as I was praying and asking for help on a continual basis. It came really filtered down from up above, I believe. And it enabled me to very, very rapidly zero in and drill down and find out what really is wrong with people. Now, what I found was there are 6 different kinds of imbalances that create illness for all of us. 6 different ways that we become imbalanced. And what I found with my patients was that no matter what they had been diagnosed with, no matter what they had been told they had, and most of them had been told that they were incurable, okay? I saw that all the time. I routinely got patients from that had been through La Jolla, Scripps, and the Mayo Clinic, and UCLA, and so on. And it was not uncommon at all. I think probably every week I got some new patient that said that every test had been run on them, and all the tests were negative, and and that kind of thing happens. And so, of course, for those people, Western medicine doesn't have anything to offer. But I would always tell those people, your subconscious mind knows exactly what's wrong with you. And we can tap into that subconscious mind, and we can find out what your subconscious mind knows, and it'll tell us what needs to be done to get you well. And it's just easy. So the body code is really it's a self-study course on energy healing. And what happened to me was I had taught parts of the body code in the past, but I never really intended on teaching to lay people the whole entire picture of the body code because I believed that it was just too powerful or too complex or something. I had this fixed idea about it. And about 3.5 years or so ago, I was told otherwise. I woke up one morning to find my mind filled with instruction. And the instruction was very clear and very specific. And the instruction was, you need to take everything you know about natural healing and put it into a self-study course that anyone can learn, and you need to make it available to anyone who wants it. And I remember thinking, are you sure about this? Because it took a lot of work to do that. In fact, it took about a year to put all that information together. But that's the body code. And so with the body code, we are able to zero in really rapidly and figure out what the underlying problems are. And the beauty of it now is that anyone can learn this. In fact, we certify people in the body code, and we certify people in the emotion code as well. And we have over 600 practitioners now in the emotion code certified worldwide. And you can go to our website at healerslibrary.com and get more information about all of this.
So there's really an option. You can either read the book and learn how to do it. You can find a practitioner like Doris who does it. And Doris and I actually Skyped. So you would be when we did this because I'm in North Carolina and she was in Alabama. And she's like, let me do a session so you'll be able to ask questions and understand it better. So Skype, phone, really, there's nothing that limits it.
No, there's nothing that limits it. And in fact, it's so interesting because when I was writing the Emotion Code book, it was really a matter of prayer writing that book, really. And as every time I would go to write the book, I would pray and I would ask God to help me to make it easy for people to understand because it actually is really easy. And I believe he did help me to do that because that's one of the consistent pieces of feedback that we get from people is that it really is simple to understand. Well, and I don't really take credit for that either. I just work here. But the other thing was that when I got to the part of the book where I had to make a decision if I was going to teach people about how this work can be done at a distance, and we call that working by proxy. And I had done that in my practice numerous times when I would have a patient that would be far away and they would call me and they couldn't come in, but they'd need help. I could work on them. And I found that I could work on someone at a distance and it worked just as well as if they were right there with me in the room. And so I prayed about it and I got a clear feeling that, yes, I should put that in the book. So I did. Because at the time I thought, well, gee, this might blow their minds. They might not be able to handle this. It might just, I might lose them if they read about this. But no, that's not been the case at all. People are very open now, and we're finally realizing, see, here we are in the 21st century, and we're finally realizing that all of the information that the quantum physicists had been telling us for all these years, for over 100 years, is actually true, that our bodies are energy, that we are all connected, and that and the beauty of this work is that it can absolutely be done at a distance. Well, what happened was, in the very end of the Emotion Code book, I put a little paragraph that said, if you need help, go to this website and I will try to help you. And it was just me, okay? So shortly after that, what had happened was I ended up creating for myself this virtual practice. And so for the next 2 years, and it's a good thing it worked out that way too, because for the next 2 years, there was no way I could have survived on just the money from the sales of my book. You don't make a whole lot of money selling books. And so luckily, for the next 2 years, I was able to have this virtual practice where I had clients, literally from all over the world. And it was so much fun. It was actually a lot better, I think, than working in a physical practice, although that was fun too. But now we have people all over the world who are doing just that, you see. And so I only needed to work, because my overhead was so low, I only needed to work basically 3 mornings a week. And I was able to totally replace my income doing that. And so now we have a lot of people doing that all over the world. And they're finding that there's nothing more rewarding than actually being able to help people to release their trapped emotions, to see the changes take place in their bodies and in their lives, to see them fall in love where maybe they couldn't fall in love before. It's the most amazing thing. I feel like the luckiest man on the whole planet. I got an email recently from a woman, one of our practitioners, She said that in January, among her other clients, she took on 3 new clients who were all single women. None of them were in a relationship. They all wanted to be, but they were all single and lonely. She found that they all had a heart, and she was able to release those emotions and take down the heart wall from all 3 of those women. This is in January. By Valentine's Day, all 3 of those women were in a relationship. All 3 were in love. Think about that.
Okay, I need her name, number, website, Skype handle, cell phone number.
Sure.
That's what I'm ready. I'm ready for that. So I'm ready to roll on that one.
The heart wall will block you from that. And let me tell you one more story that to me was so profound. I was in New York a few years ago. And I was back there for this publicity convention, and I was in this huge convention room, and I was going around from position to position, talking to different people, going around the room. And there were people there from Oprah Magazine and, the Good Morning America and Today Show and all these magazines, on and on and on, radio, TV. And some people were interested, some weren't. And I ended up talking to arriving in a booth and talking to this woman who was she was a freelance writer. And right away, she was very interested, which to me was exciting because, some people weren't interested at all. She wanted to know more right away. And so right then the bell rang. And so we were able to, I said, well, let's go sit down over here and I'll tell you more about it. So we did. So we sat down and I started telling her about the emotion code and how it works. And she told me that she was 43 years old. She was very interested in, she had a goal to be married in a year. She told me that she was an Orthodox Jew and that she was very strictly religiously observant, but she'd never really been in a long-term relationship, and she really wanted to get married. And it wasn't that she was not attractive, so that wasn't the problem. So I started testing her, and I told her if she had a heart wall, that would interfere with her ability to find love and to get married, and to find her soulmate. And so I tested her and found she did have a heart wall. So I sat across from her and released the emotions that she had one at a time that were making up this wall. And by the way, an interesting thing about this was in my wife's case, the symbolic material that her subconscious mind had chosen for this wall to be made of was hardwood. She grew up in a house with hardwood floors, you see. So when I checked this other woman to see what her heart wall was made of, what I got was that it was made of clear plastic, and that it was about 4 inches thick. And you can muscle test, and we show you how to do this and how to find out this information. It's interesting. But anyway, when I found that on her, she said, "Oh, I love clear plastic." She said, "When I was a kid, my parents covered the couches and the furniture and the stairs and everything with clear plastic." And have you ever been in a home like that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would not do well.
Kind of like, you're not. It's like a museum. You're not sure if you should sit there. But if you think about this, it hit me, the analogy of this. Here her heart had been covered under this layer of clear plastic. Well, here she is, very religious, born into this world that is a very dirty, dark, can be a filthy world. She wanted to keep her heart clean, I think. And so what do you use? How do you keep your heart clean? Well, how do you keep the couch clean? You cover it with plastic. And so that's what her heart, that was the symbolic material there. Anyway, I started releasing these emotions from her. She was sitting across from me. I handed her a magnet. And you can use a refrigerator magnet to do this. We've tested all kinds of magnets. And if you don't have a magnet, you can actually just use your fingertips. And we release an emotion by just going from the forehead over the top of the head to the back of the neck 3 times. Once you've gone through the process to identify the emotion and it's ready to be released. That's how you do it. 3 times like this. So I handed her a little magnet, and I'm finding the emotion. They all had to do with different events in her life. And when we would get it ready, when it would be ready to be released, she would go ahead and release it. And I think there were 6 or 7 emotions making up her heart wall. When we got to the very last one, she did the first pass, and she got halfway through the second pass over the governing meridian. Okay, that's why we do this. Halfway through that second pass, and suddenly I knew that heart wall was gone, because suddenly it was like a stone had been rolled away from that heart of hers. And I was in the path, I was in the beam of the most beautiful energy, the most beautiful feeling that was coming, radiating out from her heart. And it's hard to describe. If you have a long, cold winter and you finally get a sunny day and you walk outside and the sun is shining and you throw your head back and you just say, oh man, that feels amazing. That's what this was like. It was really strange and hard to describe, but I could feel this. Now, I told her what I was feeling, and she wasn't feeling it herself. But I think that God gave me that witness, really, I would say, as recompense for doing that for her without asking for money or anything like that. I just did it to try to help her, and also as a witness to me that this is real, and that this is a real thing. And so it was a really neat thing to feel. Well, I told her, I said, now that heart wall is gone. I said, now that pure essence of who you really are is radiating out from you, and it's filling the immensity of space. And I said, I think that things are going to start being attracted into your life that you really want. And I think that now you get a lot better chance of actually finding that soulmate that you're looking for. And as I was saying these words, no kidding, Jewish doctor that I'd met back there, super handsome guy. He looked like a Greek god. He walks right by me like I'm not even there. He walks right up to her and he strikes up this conversation. And I just thought, wow, like a moth to the flame. I said, this really works fast.
Oh, all right. Well, sign me up. Now, we're almost at the end of the hour, and there are a couple questions that I like to ask all guests. And the first is, what advice would you give to someone who's struggling right now? They might have lost their job, going through a divorce, they're in a really tough place. What advice would you have for them?
Well, I'll tell you what, I have a special offer for your listeners. And that is, they can get the Emotion Code ebook and the Emotion Code audio downloads free, okay, by going to this website. Ready? It's Emotion Code Offer, OFFER, emotioncodeoffer.com. You can go there and you can download the Emotion Code book. So if you might be totally broke, but you're apparently on a computer right now, so you should be able to do this, and it actually is totally free, okay? So you can download the book, you can start reading it, and we also give you on that website all of the Emotion Code audio books. So this is the whole entire book, okay, all 400 pages, dictated by me, read by me to you. So you can download those MP3s, you can burn them to a CD, you can put them in your car, put them on your iPod, put them on your iPhone, whatever, listen to those. And that is the first step, because you can learn how to do this. And a lot of people have done this on themselves. And that's how it's designed. You can, but if you need help, you can certainly go to Healer's Library, for example. You can practitioner there, and there are people all over the world that can help you. But the first step for you is to realize that there's hope for you, and that there is an amazingly powerful method now available to you that can change your life, and that can change the lives of your family members, and that can also, if you're interested, can possibly provide a whole new way to make a living for you, with a business that is completely portable, that you can take anywhere in the world. And there's nothing more rewarding, really, than helping people to get well and to achieve their own destinies. So that's what I would say. And
then you kind of delved into it, but I'm all about, the reason I do the shows, to get people off the couch, because I just don't want them to watch and then not do anything. So what would you say to people that they can do right after the show, tonight before bed, or when they wake up in the morning to reawaken their brilliance?
Well, my suggestion is go to emotioncodeoffer.com and download the book, start reading it, download the audios, listen to the first chapter if you prefer to listen to books, or read the first chapter if you prefer to read books, and it's going to resonate with you. You're going to understand it. The book is a page turner. And there's so many stories. There are stories on just about every other page in that book, real life experiences that happened to me. There's a whole chapter in there on animals, because animals get trapped emotions as well. And this is the most powerful method that I believe the world has ever seen for actually healing not only people, but also the animals that we love. So if you love animals, I'm telling you, you read this book and you're going to know how to be an animal whisperer and a human whisperer as well.
Well, that is wonderful, and we're at the end of the hour, and I truly appreciate your time, Dr. Brad. This was very informative.
Oh, thanks, Julie. Just let me know. I'd be happy to be on again anytime you want, and we'll talk about anything you want.
All right, well, I'm ready to get rid of the heart wall and have the soulmate come. You caught my ears at that. And I want to thank everyone for listening tonight, and I want to remind our listeners in the Triangle area, the last Thrive event of the season is Stress-Free Holidays. So if you gain weight during the holidays, you fight with your family, we've got an expert body, mind, spirit panel that will be able to help you have a non-stressed holiday. And if you go to reawakenyourbrilliance.com, you can find out more information. See you next week. Bye now.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Sundays 9 a.m. to noon. Health In with Debbie Brooke, Mondays 11 a.m. to noon. The Scope of Things with Marilyn Shannon, Mondays 7 to 8 p.m. Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Mondays 8 to 9 p.m. Body Talk with Cindy Prince, first Tuesdays 8 to 9 p.m. Reawaken Your Brilliance with Julie Seibert, Wednesdays, 8 to 9 p.m. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by ThatVidBlasterGuy.com, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.